Oh, you probably talked with Josh.
I think so. Yeah.
Did Ryan ping you yesterday about what we're working on?
He had mentioned it.
It's exciting.
We did not. Well, I didn't get any details. He just said he needed to talk to me. So
It's exciting.
we were both in different places, and he had told me about a little bit about it.
I tried. I know the difference.
Yeah, I go with the evaluation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, they're putting the food out now just as you see it. Please help yourself and of course make yourself welcome to the to this lunch. I'm going to start off. Bill Kelso is the executive of External Affairs, Chief Executive of External Affairs for Goodwills in Southeast Georgia. He's been around for a long time and done some amazing stuff.
Well, I
So
wouldn't say that.
If you'll pull that mic to you, Bill.
Yes, sir.
Does that say number 1 or 2?
This is number 1.
Number 1, I'm going to turn you on so that you can hear. And you can also use that mic or pass it around, whichever you prefer.
Well, if you're good here, I will use this microphone here, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name's Bill Kelso. I work at the Goodwill in Savannah, and I have been asked by the chairman to moderate this Lunch and Learn. And so we have 3 guests with us. The theme of this Lunch and Learn for the committee and committee members is workforce development. And so we have 3 guests that represent 3 very different sectors of our workforce, and we've got a set of really, really tough questions that I created overnight. They have no idea what I'm going to ask them. But we really wanted to stage this as more of a conversation and also building Q&A for committee members and guests with our guests. Mr. Chairman, hard stop. Have you got a time for a hard stop for me?
Is it 3?
3 o'clock. Okay, so we'll be efficient with folks' time, and let's just see where we go with this. So our folks that are with us today is Mr. Pete Marin. He is the president and CEO of T5 Data Centers. He'll talk more about that company here in just a minute. We also have Ariana Esposito. She's Vice President for Services and Support for Autism Speaks. I'm excited to hear more about that. Very interested in that. And of course, we have a very known entity, Mark Peavy. He's the Chief of Staff for the Technical College System of Georgia. And Mark, you got an upgrade. I didn't realize back in 2003. So congratulations belatedly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with Pete, then move into Ariana, and then move into Mark, ask a series of questions, allow them to just have a conversation with us, and then we'll see where we end up and leave time for questions. So Pete, President and CEO of T5 Data Centers, tell us a little bit about your company, but also as critical, what are key drivers of the data center sector right now and how that impacts Georgia?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for having me. And yes, Pete Marin, President, CEO, and founder of T5 Data Centers. We are based here in Atlanta. So our corporate office is right in Buckhead. This is a company I started in 2008, and then today we're really 3 data center businesses under the T5 umbrella. So development, construction, and operations. We have a 500-person business, and we consistently have, right at 100 open positions across our system, and we operate across the entire United States, as well as several select markets in Europe. And then as it relates to Georgia, and on the development side of our business is where we buy land, secure power, build these buildings, and then we lease them to what's referred to as the Mag 7, right? So these technology companies, it's a very short list of customers today. And the phrase that people are familiar with today is AI or cloud computing. Right. And we build the buildings that serve that. And then we have an operations team that operates them, and we have a construction team that does the fit out. And the key, getting to the question, so the key drivers as it relates to our business, for someone to be a successful data center developer, you need 5 ingredients. And Georgia has 2 of those. So the ingredients are land, power, capital, a team, right? You have to have a team to get it done. Then you have to have equipment in your supply chain. So you have to buy equipment in advance. And so if you have those 5 ingredients, you can be a very successful data center developer. And but it's very hard to get those 5 ingredients. And but Georgia today is number 2 in the country as far as data center markets. I personally would like to see it stay that way and get to number 1. And it's just recently happened. And the abundance of land in Metro Atlanta and in call it a 100-mile radius of Atlanta is a key component. And then Atlanta was really, the history of Atlanta goes back to a telecommunications hub, which really started because of the railroads, right? And so there's a lot of communication in Atlanta. So I'll pause, but I'm very bullish on the state of Georgia for additional data center development, and I look forward to this discussion.
So Mark, or Pete, what are we? So who are the other big markets in the country? Who's Georgia competing with?
Yeah, I mean, so number one, it's been that way for a while, is Northern Virginia. And the reason it's number one is because of, and I'll try and stay away from the technical speak, but there's a location there called May East. And May East was the first internet exchange on the East Coast of the U.S. And this happened back in the 80s, and then it moved from Vienna, Virginia, out to Ashburn, Virginia. And it's in a building that is owned and operated by a company called Equinix, a large data center operator, public company, very successful. And data centers gather around other data centers just like car dealerships. And so there's data transfer that happens with all of these devices. Everybody loves these devices, right? They want them to work. But there's also data that goes between data centers to make things work, right? And so the clustering of data centers happens in certain markets. And Northern Virginia is number one. Atlanta today has become number two. And then you've got, Dallas, Texas, Chicago, Illinois, Reno, Nevada, New Albany in Ohio, which is outside of Columbus. And then, on the West Coast, it's Hillsboro, Oregon, and then Silicon Valley in Northern California. And Silicon Valley has May West. So the town of Santa Clara is where May West is, and that was the second internet exchange on the West Coast.
And so correct me if I'm wrong, 20 years ago we were calling these data centers server farms. Is that fair or unfair?
Yeah, it's fair. I think they're still referred to as that. I mean, if you went into one of our buildings, you would see thousands of servers
Right.
that'd be humming. And what we're doing is we're building buildings that are basically large computers. It's the same thing that Michael Dell did years ago in his dorm room in Austin, Texas. We had a kit of parts. He had a shell, right? And he had a power source. He had a cooling source. He had a chip. Data centers are the same thing. They're just at scale, right? And each one of those servers has chips on them, and they communicate with the other chips in the rack and so on.
Awesome. So you talked about the ingredients as we begin to wrap up, and then Ariana, we're gonna roll to you and remind everybody that we'll just open up for Q&A when we finish with each one of our guests. You talked about the ingredients that attract companies in your sector, that attract T5. What other incentives are going to be important to allow this sector to grow?
Yeah, I mean,
and throughout.
it's really akin to just site selection in general. So before I started the company, I was a tenant rep broker. I worked for Roger Staubach, and I started the data center practice there. And so I would take customers around the country. I would meet with economic development groups, right, and we would compete predominantly on incentives, right. And that's just the way the game's played, and every industry does that, right. And so there's a movement, and I get it. I get, why are we giving tax incentives to these big corporates? Well, it's the way the game's played, right? And if we want a large share or a decent share of the digital future that's coming, and it's coming in a big way, and it's a great opportunity for the state of Georgia, we need to stay in the incentive game. We can't back off of the sales tax incentive. We've got to keep it. I actually want to see it extended or the sunset removed. And the longer term benefits to the state, from jobs to investment to school budgets. I think data centers are one of the largest contributors to the school budgets. And so there's a lot of benefits that come from it.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm not going to spoil it for Mr. Peavy, but yeah, if you look at the most in-demand careers in 2025 and sectors, and then you take it out to 2050, I have a feeling that folks working in that industry, that's going to be one of them. But Mark will tell that story. So, thank you, Pete. So, Ariana, let's talk about Autism Speaks. And so, tell us about Autism Speaks and what work is Autism Speaks currently doing in Georgia?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. Autism Speaks is the leading advocacy organization on behalf of and with people with autism across the country. And through our work, we accomplish a variety of different things at a local and national level, including ensuring reliable access to information and services across the lifespan. So we're most notably we're most known for our 100-day toolkit. 20 years ago, Autism Speaks was founded. We've entered into our 20th year, and we're known for our 100-day toolkit, which chronicles the first 100 days after a family member receives a diagnosis, providing really critical information and support. And we don't just stop there. We support and have resources for individuals across their entire lifespan. We're active in both state and federal advocacy, advancing quality of life and supporting research and clinical outcomes to improve quality of life for children and adults alike.
So employment for the autistic community, perhaps commonsensical, but why is that really important that we're having this conversation about employment for the autistic community?
So it's a great question. Nationally, there is a 20% employment rate for people with disabilities, including autism. There are roughly 70,000 adolescents that age out of school services every single year. So if you're not familiar with special education, that means that 21 individuals who have an IEP, autism, and other disabilities, the school entitlements that have been supporting them up until that point expire, and then they enter the world of adulthood. Out of that, with the 20% of individuals who are employed, that is not because they're not qualified, that they're not able to, that they don't want to. It's that there are barriers that exist in workplaces and in acquiring employment that make it particularly challenging for autistic people to seek employment.
Talk about those barriers briefly.
So familiarity with autism, it's communication. It can affect communication, social skills, as well as behaviors. And given that a lot of workplaces and acquiring and searching for jobs it relies heavily on social skills and communication. Think about interviewing. It's trying to decode what the other person is really looking for. How can I position myself to show up in the best possible way so that the person who's interviewing me wants to hire me. For someone with autism and related conditions, that's really challenging to do. One, to be able to communicate strengths, to identify a job that matches those strengths, and then be able to communicate and convey why they're the best candidate. And the challenges don't just stop there as well. Workplaces as a whole, some are really warm and welcoming to, naturally, to autistic employees, and other workplaces sort of need a little bit of understanding and awareness of what autism looks like at the workplace.
So how are you specifically working in that environment, and how is Autism Speaks working in that environment to help the autistic community identify career paths, jobs? Give us some examples of what's working and what you're working with.
Sure, and I can speak to the work we're doing in Georgia as well. So our program, we launched it back in 2020. It's called Workplace Inclusion Now, and it is a workforce development program where we work with employers by providing training, information, and technical assistance to look at all of the things that they're doing really well that perhaps aren't clearly marketed to autistic and neurodiverse employees, and helping them position their roles to attract more neurodiverse talent. And then on the counterpart, we also work with autistic job seekers by providing information and resources through two channels. One, through digital trainings and resources, but also through our incredible autism response team. That is a nationwide information and referral center. We operate 9 to 5 in every time zone, and will connect individuals and families to resources wherever they live in the country.
So,
Bill, hold just a second.
Please,
Let me remind the members that lunch is here, and this is Lunch and Learn, so you can't do that on an empty stomach.
help
So
yourself.
please help yourself while
Yeah,
we're doing
we're just having a conversation over here, so this is great.
And before you go on, if members want to ask questions while we're going on, and I want to interrupt if I can, I got a question because
Okay, go ahead.
my
Yeah,
daughter's
perfect.
a special ed teacher, so this means a lot. Isn't it true that the folks that are on the autistic spectrum are extremely bright mathematically wise. So that goes back to your industry a little.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Autism itself is a spectrum, and so for some it presents with very high IQs and affinity for math and science, and for others it includes affinity for arts, social sciences. So each person is unique, but yes, there definitely is parts of the autism spectrum that have an affinity for math and science.
So I think a great question, because that leads into what was my final question, which is what are specific employment sectors that Autism Speaks or data and research has shown that the autistic community is successful in?
It really, truthfully, it varies, and it's really dependent on each individual, right? So we,
Fair.
as an
Fair.
organization and the work that we do, we're in a variety of industries, everything from technology to the intelligence field, manufacturing, supply chain, and in Georgia in particular, not only are we in manufacturing, working with a couple of manufacturers here, as well as the School Nutrition Association across the entire state of Georgia. So we launched, we began with our first county, Cobb County. We've trained over 800 staff in Cobb County, and that's resulted in, I believe, 7 or 8 jobs directly for autistic and neurodiverse.
Representative Franklin?
Yeah, so I just want to make a statement, and then I want to ask you a question. It's slightly off topic, but so I run a car dealership. I'm a car dealer in South Georgia, and I have an employee that's slightly on the spectrum. I don't know how far that goes or what that looks like, but he works in my parts department, and he's brilliant because he's so meticulous about where the parts go and everything. I think he's actually memorized like where they all go. It's unfathomable, to be honest with you. So it's perfect for my industry and for that job, for that placement. And we've learned, and tell me if I'm wrong with this, but we've learned that we've had to, it's not a big challenge to have him there. Basically, you can't bring a certain change. It has to be a slow change. So that he can, process that change and get used to it, and then that's basically it. And but he's an incredible employee for that particular job.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just want to applaud you for that, because that's one area that we actually use it with. But my question to you is that do you find that autism is on the rise? Is there more cases of autism recently? And if that's true, is there an answer for that?
So we do know I believe it's every 2 years the updated prevalence numbers come out, and currently it's 1 in 36 children in the United States are on the spectrum, are diagnosed with autism, and that translates to about 1 in 45 adults across the U.S.
But is that increasing?
It is, yeah. So, when I first entered the field, it was 1 in 181 or 182, and so it definitely is increasing.
How long ago was that? That you were in the field?
I've been in the
That's
field.
a terrible question. I retract that question.
Yeah.
Continue.
Now, is there any thought about why, or do you know? Or
I think we attribute it to greater awareness and increasing, just naturally increasing within the population.
just being able to diagnose better, basically.
Oh, yeah. I mean, through awareness campaigns and better diagnosis. And that leads back to early intervention is really key. So the earlier you receive your autism diagnosis, the better quality outcomes that that the person will have.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And thank you for your comment about and sharing the employee in the Parks Department. I think that is very consistent with what we hear from employers, and what the research shows is that employers who have and hire autistic and neurodiverse employees have higher return on their investments, lower turnover, higher retention rates, and better profit margins. And those are things, while we say it's good, it's a feel-good moment, and it feels good to do the right thing, it also is good for business when you expand the
and I think it's just
neurodiversity.
placement. Like, you wouldn't put him selling cars, but you wouldn't put an introvert selling cars either.
Right.
Exactly.
It might not be the best placement for him. So but thank you, appreciate
Exactly.
So why don't we pause here, and are there any questions before we move to Mark Peavy? Any questions for Pete, or further questions for Ariana? Pete, of course, talked about data centers and the model that his company has stood up here in Georgia. Any other questions before we?
Pete, if you will, that the industry that has to do, is it FinCEN, that has to do with electronic charge cards, if you will. It seems like we're the hub of that in Georgia for the world. Do you know anything about that industry?
Yeah, I think you're correct. There's a lot of what's called fintech.
Fintech, that's it.
Right, in the southeast and metro Atlanta. And it's the, the point of sale. I don't know if this is working. Is this working?
Yeah, it's
we can hear
working.
you.
You're good.
So all the point of sale technology, and it runs through data centers, and it runs through data centers all over the country, right? And so and then the speed of the network. There was a comment by the former Google CEO, when the network becomes a computer, then everything's going to start to work, right? So the network, the speed of it, as the network speed increases so fast, the network, works as the computer. But yeah, a lot of fintech in the southeast. Yeah.
The idea that I can actually make a charge in Argentina and come to Georgia and right back there within a second or two is amazing.
It's fascinating what's going to come, and I get it. A lot of it can be scary, right? This whole AI, and trust me, I build these buildings, but there's a lot of things that could be very beneficial to us that'll make our lives easier, and point of sale will get even better, right? Because if you just think about the shopping cart experience in a grocery store, we put all our stuff in a car, you take it to the cashier, and you still got to pull it out and scan each item. There's technology coming where you just take it right out and it captures everything, right? And it's in use now. It's just not widespread. But there's that type of technology will be widespread in the next 5 years.
Lastly, for me, where do you see AI fitting in the future of this of the data centers?
What do I see AI feeding?
Yes. What do you see it doing with the data centers?
Yeah, I mean, it's, so right now, there's two components of, I'll try and keep this really brief. Two components of what happened in the data center industry. And when I started, it was outsourcing enterprises, so companies that didn't want to operate data centers. Then you had the advent of cloud computing, and that's just an outsource model. And that's just a short list of companies that said, hey, we'll operate your data center, and we'll do it for you, we'll run the software. And Amazon was the leader in that, right? They had all this excess capacity. So these companies started building these commercial cloud businesses, and it's just an outsource model. And then now, in the past 2 years, you've heard there's been a lot in the press about artificial intelligence. And there's two components of artificial intelligence. There's the learning phase, and then there's the using phase, or inference is what it's called. And so the learning phase is, we refer to as machine learning. And so all of these servers are running these algorithms to solve complex problems, and they're learning all basic stuff from like driving a car. Like, we still can't figure out how to drive a car yet, but it's going to happen. And so as it learns, then you're going to see people start using will interact with the data center to have that work. So for instance, on the car example, if you've got a self-driving car 5 years from now, it's going to be communicating with the network. The network's going to be feeding it real-time information about a stop sign that's coming up, or a person that's walking in front of you, or an accident that's and it's going to happen so fast you won't be able to see it, or you won't notice it. And so yeah, that stuff's coming. On the medical front, I think the medical front's going to be tremendously beneficial, where AI, you can type into a website and say, here, these are my symptoms, what do you think? And the data set, with your doctor might be, 20 patients that he just saw, but AI has, 50 million that it can go look at really quickly and give you feedback and say, no, I think you got this, and these are the 5 medications. Go talk to your doctor about these 5, and it'll streamline medications in the whole drug industry. So there's a lot of good things that are going to come from it.
Good. Any other committee members? Yes? Great. Okay, Mark Peavy, Chief of Staff with Technical College System of Georgia. Thanks for being with us today, Mark. So let me start here. So I hinted at it earlier, but so what are the careers that are most in demand in Georgia now, and even in the future? talk us through that.
That's a tremendous question to start with. I will say that is part of TCSG's focus, and we are effectively the workforce development engine for the state of Georgia. And I think it's a proof point of that happens to be with the two partners we're sitting up here with today. So whether we're talking about a certain segment of employable Georgians in terms of Autism Speaks. We're already working with the local team. We just had some great conversations the last couple of weeks to help a certain segment of the population, or whether you're talking about a certain segment of industry. I'm just about guarantee you that all of Peter's clients here in Georgia we're already working with, who are manning the buildings and using the buildings that he's building, the data centers, whether it be Meta, or Google or Amazon. We're already plugged in and working to help develop their workforce, and so that is what we do across the state. We do it through 88 campuses, 22 colleges. We will work across basically 5 pillars, and I'll get to the question in a second. I hadn't read the question, but we do it through 5 pillars. We are the adult education engine and entity for the state of Georgia. So that end of the spectrum, folks who, for whatever reason, didn't have that high school credential, that high school diploma, we help get them in the workforce there. We do it through what we call economic development, or more appropriately, specific industry training opportunities. So a specific company comes and says, hey, we need this training done for this set of employees. We work with them all across the state to do that. We have our technical education, which is what most folks think about, the 4 credit programs that we offer. Big component of what we do. Then we have Quick Start, which many folks have heard about. Quick Start is, I think it's probably, and I'll get yelled at if I get this wrong, but it's the 14th year in a row, I believe, that Quick Start has been recognized as one of the strongest economic development tools in the nation. Big part of why Georgia continues to be one of the best places to build a business in the nation, and so that is part of TCSG. And then lastly, we have our, which I know we'll talk a bit more about, WorkSource Georgia.
Right.
The Office of Workforce Development that really does apprenticeship work, administers what many of us, you may be familiar with the WIOA dollars, if you hear that term, large federal dollars that flow through Georgia to be able to support workforce development across the state. All of that happens through TCSG, and so we are kind of front to back, soup to nuts, whatever term you want to use, workforce development for the state of Georgia. And so we're really happy to do that. And this is, like I said, these 2 partnerships that we have here are a great example of how we're doing that. Part of doing that really is to think hard about what those high demand programs are. Back to your question specifically. You think about cybersecurity, nursing, manufacturing, the automotive industry in general. Certainly you can spread out to, you can slice that component of traditional engines and traditional automotive versus EV, and we're doing all that kind of work. Aviation, other things. If you look across all those specific programs, we will have about 145 to 150,000 students in our technical education component in a given year, this past year, and fully about 25 to 30% of those students are in one of those high demand industries that I just talked about. So you think about the ability to kind of target where we as a state need workforce development. We're really doing that and proud about that. The other piece that I think when you speak specifically to workforce development, how TCSG as a whole impacts it, all of those students, we have about a 92% in-field job placement rate. And what that means is it's a pretty simple term. You come to work and you come and take one of our programs, 92% of the students are moving on into a job in that specific career field. If you then add on the layer of folks who've come to finish one piece with us and move on to some additional post-secondary education, that number goes up to almost 99%. And so we really do feel like we've got some success in making sure the programs that students are taking are directly applicable either immediately into the workforce or into another phase of post-secondary education that will eventually lead them into the workforce. So we focus on those high demand areas. A lot of work that goes on with the State Workforce Board. If you may or may not know, the State Workforce Board is attached to TCSG, and so we support a lot of their work. They're an independent entity as they do their work, and over the last year or so, specifically last year's session, the body passed some legislation that encouraged them and helped the State Workforce Board create a broader high-demand career list for the state of Georgia. So they've been working hard on that. We focus all our programs on that to make sure that every program we got is connected on a local level to a job at the end of it. And I think that's part of that placement rate that we talked about.
So how is, you talked about WorkSource, Georgia, so how is it impacting Georgia's workforce development efforts? What do you mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, and WorkSource Georgia in particular, for those, again, that may not be familiar with the term, but that is the administrative side of WorkSource Georgia and the federally funded employment and training system that the state has. And so WorkSource Georgia is that title. Our Office of Workforce Development manages that. And so that ends up being a centralized place for employers and potential employees to be able to come.
Right.
So it's a bit of a job board, but it's a lot more than that. Resources, and so that is the specific term of Workforce Georgia. But the Office of Workforce Development really impacts statewide, has a statewide impact through the 19 local workforce development area boards. And so across the state, there are 19 of those. The WIOA dollars, the federal money that comes through, we manage that, but the money and how it is spent gets done down at the local level. So those 19 boards are working at your local community level. They're working with industries that, maybe somebody has had a layoff, and we then work for career fairs and job fairs in that specific local industry. Then the WIOA dollars that flow through those local workforce boards are available to do some retraining, to do some job placement pieces. So all the things that one of your constituents who loses a job on a local level, that's one of their main resources to be able to get plugged back into the economy and to do that. Those pieces also work with, and it kind of starts with Quick Start, but it flows all the way through WorkSource Georgia and our Office of Workforce Development. For those, you get a new industry, whether it be an 8,000 person Hyundai plant or an 8-person startup entrepreneurial site if they need new specific employment. All of those, if those programs are tied into something that we are teaching, end up being a part of workforce development that TCSG does on a regular basis.
Good stuff.
Question.
Go.
And I know other committee members have some as well. When I got here 150 years ago, it was there was this perception, and parents, we all want the best for our children, and at that time, the driving force was to get your child into college. Has that perception changed as far as your students coming in? And I hope they have, because I'm seeing more students, it seems, that realize that they're connecting a technical education to a job instead of a college education, sometimes with debt and no job. So,
Mr. Chairman, I won't claim to have a crystal ball to be able to answer that entirely, but I will just tell you anecdotally that we've seen, as we've come out of the pandemic, we've seen 9, 10, 12% growth rates over the last 3 or 4 years since coming out of the pandemic. If you contrast that, now our USG partners here in the state have also done well. They're growing, but if you look at on a national level, many 4-year programs have seen, in some cases, declines, and if not, very moderate growth. And so what I think that speaks to is exactly what you're talking about. There's a much greater recognition that the opportunity to learn a technical skill, to get in a shorter-term program and go directly into the workforce, start making money, the whole conversation about college debt, how can you get to a sustainable, life-sustaining wage sooner rather than later, all of those things I really do think are painting a different picture around technical education. I also think if you look across business and industry, again, you think about Peter's clients and those folks who are working in that high-tech industry. You get into cybersecurity, you get into any of those other fields that might be in some of those jobs, and you can get into it and be making a great salary with a short-term certificate, a 2-year associate's degree, and then if the career ladder is available in that particular space, you can continue on, but you can get into it a lot sooner, a lot faster, and I think that's a big reflection of what's driving our enrollment growth.
Representative Herring.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for the information. Is that an Army pin? I see?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Thank you for your service. I notice that anywhere I go. My dad was in the Air Force, but
Love it.
I am in a district where we have Central Georgia Technical College, and we've seen a lot of growth there. They're also starting to expand by having students study abroad, and the dual enrollment program is growing tremendously in our high schools. Are you seeing that across the state? And are they offering those opportunities at all the technical colleges at what we're seeing in Bibb County?
Well, I'm not allowed to say that I have a favorite technical college president. So I'm not
can tell
telling
me
you,
outside
I'm
the
not
door.
telling you that Dr. Ivan Allen is my favorite, but he might be one of them. So, but in terms of what they are, he is absolutely one of the leading voices in terms of what we do. And so they do tremendous work there. There's two pieces to your question, I think. The question about the study abroad piece, we've got a few other colleges, but I will tell you right now that they absolutely lead the charge. They've got some unique partnerships in the healthcare field and some other things that they're doing in a very unique way that we're looking to build further on across the state and get some of those more innovative entrepreneur opportunities out there. So they're leading the pack there. In terms of dual enrollment, we certainly see that grow, and they do a great job of that. We will serve probably close to, I don't think we'll break 50,000 students this year, but we'll be close to a 50,000 student number in terms of dual enrollment. We serve approximately at our 22 colleges about 2/3 of students who are taking dual enrollment across the state, and so we see that as a tremendous opportunity. Really, we really see that being impactful in rural parts of the state where perhaps there's transportation issues and other things. Our colleges do a great job of reaching out if we need to go teach in a high school building and we can get staff there to do that. We're really all on top of doing that one. That's part of how that number grows. Probably the most important factor that we see is that most of our students, and I think the number's probably about 60% right now, are moving on and using it as an opportunity to move on to either directly into the workforce or directly into other post-secondary education. So we're seeing some real strong development there. We're about 1/3 of those students of that 50,000 number. 1/3 of them are picking up a certificate and going right into the workforce as they get out of high school, so they've had that opportunity to do that. So we expect dual enrollment to continue to be a real strong part of what we do.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good. Mark, let's perhaps begin to wind it down here. And I when I tapped into this, I'm really interested to learn more. Does TCSG offer labor planning strategies or consultations to organizations looking to come to Georgia? What does that look like?
That's a great question. We do some of that on an anecdotal basis, but where that really happens is in the strength of partnerships. And so if you think about what our Quick Start arm does, they're absolutely getting involved on the front end to help folks talk about that. But that's a direct partnership in particular with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. As they are out recruiting and looking for new companies to come to the state of Georgia, Quick Start and the technical college system is at the table to say, if you're going to bring an entity here and you're going to need X workforce, this is how we're going to help you build that initial workforce, and Quick Start is the key component of building that initial workforce. So I mentioned Hyundai earlier. Yeah. Quick Start will have trained all of their initial employees when they get ready to open that building. They've got a groundbreaking grand opening, I should say, coming up next week, and we will have trained every one of their initial employees that go in that building. But more importantly, for the long run, for the 10, 20, 30, 40-year outlook, our local colleges that surround that Hyundai plant will continue to provide that workforce over the next 30, 40 years. So that is really where all those pieces kind of come together.
I love it. And so I'll segue into this as we begin to wrap this up and open it up to questions. So I work for Goodwill Southeast Georgia in Savannah, Georgia. We're one of 4 Goodwill territories in the state of Georgia. We have border to border along the coast, several counties in, and so our metropolitan areas include obviously Savannah, Statesboro, Jessup, Brunswick, Georgia, the whole Glenn County area, Richmond Hill, et cetera. And Goodwill as a social enterprise generates dollars to deliver and reinvest workforce development programs in our communities, particularly focused on folks who are most vulnerable in our communities, and to help skill them up and train them up and get them to an interview. I believe the power of stories, and we talk about partnerships, the partnership that we currently have and look to expand with the technical college system of Georgia looks like this. A young man comes to us who I'll call Clark, who is hired at Goodwill to work as a donor greeter and is taking donations at our retail store. Long history trying to help his family at home. He's working multiple jobs but knows Clark wants more. And so Clark works with a internal ambassador, as we call him, someone that works with our employees. and this is duplicated in the community constantly. And Clark realizes he has an interest in aviation. And so over the next several weeks in working with Clark, Clark decides to enroll in the luxury craft cabinet making technical certificate at Savannah Technical College. Goodwill pays the tuition as part of our programs that we do. We do this also for folks in the community. He completes that program and within 30 days is hired by a large local aerospace company in Savannah, Georgia. You know who I'm talking about. And suddenly Clark's life has changed dramatically. So those kinds of partnerships and those kinds of stories that are duplicated and replicated throughout our state, but couldn't happen if it wasn't for our entrepreneurs that live in our state, for the folks that are delivering critical services to those that need them to be able to compete in the workplace, but most importantly, or as important, a system like TCGS, who is there to work with partners to serve everybody in the state of Georgia. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if there are final comments, that I'll start with Ariana that you want to make, closing comments, and then Peter, and then Mark.
Just another, can you hear me? Just another sincere thank you for having me and representing, Autism Speaks. As it relates to our work in Georgia, we are very eager to continue to expand our partnership with the Georgia School Nutrition Association. So if you happen to know schools or counties that could benefit, we would love to work with them. We have a grant to be able to support all 159, I believe, counties that are part of Georgia School Nutrition Association. And then second, if you happen to know a business that is interested in learning how to become inclusive, and to your excellent point earlier, it is not difficult at all. We really work to make it as seamless and effective as possible. You can reach out to autismspeaks.org/win. And then third and finally, as we're getting ready for World Autism Month, also known as Autism Acceptance Month in April. If you know anyone who has a loved one with autism or is on the spectrum themselves and is looking for resources, autismspeaks.org to get connected to resources, but then also our incredible autism response team. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes. So we do have aggressive plans to grow our development business, and Georgia is on the list. And so we are looking to build 5 scaled campuses. And these campuses will have 1 gigawatt of power each. There'll be 20 buildings each, and we're going to do 5 of these, so it's a 100-building strategy. And this is a 10-year business plan, but Georgia is very much a part of this. And it will take a lot of capital. It will take a lot of power, right, and land, but it also takes people to not only build them, but to operate these sites. And, historically, and if you look at our workforce, we have a large percentage of veterans that work at T5.
Nice.
And specifically, we focused in on the Navy nuke program. So folks coming out of Navy, we did this probably 15 years ago, and we were one of the first to do it. And then the industry followed us, but we hire a lot of former Navy nukes, and they're wonderful. We took wonderful employees, but we took them out of one mission critical environment, and we put them into another, right, and to run a data center. So. And there will be more of that. And then when we build these buildings, it takes thousands of electricians and thousands of workers on the mechanical contracting side. And at peak, our sites typically get up to 1,200 people on the construction team to build a site. And so it's a big lift. So anyway, we're happy to be here and happy to be based in Georgia.
Good, thank you. Mark?
Just say thank you, and certainly thank you to the body for the support you guys have provided to TCSG. We continue to work hard to be the workforce development engine that you guys want us to be and what you pay us to do effectively. And so we're always happy to have an opportunity to sit here with 2 partners, like I just said, one representing a sector of a population of Georgians that need employment, and another representing an industry sector that need employees. And so we're glad to be a part of connecting and helping on both of those pieces.
Good. Mr. Chairman, I return it back to you. We're calling this a lunch and learn. I hope lunch was good, and I hope there was a little bit of learning going on today as we tried to present to you some information.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you coming up, and thank you, T5. Thank you, Goodwill. You didn't mention the tons and tons of material that your employees keep from going to the landfill, by the way, that are recycled.
We do. That's
And-
exactly right. Yeah, and so sustainability is a really important value of ours and part of our planning and our strategic. We divert 13 million just in our area only, 13 million pounds from the landfill, and with other sustainability programs in the work. So yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you.
And Autism Speaks, thank you again all for sponsoring lunch. Real proud of our Reardon Center in Savannah. They do an amazing job down there, so I'll just toss that out. And they're the same way all over the state, and that's where you really learn, what the programs do and what it really means. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's no other questions, or we will be adjourned. Take a lunch when you go.
There we go. 5 minutes early.
Yeah.